Overall, I adore just about everyone in Elden Ring's cast. There's just something special about each one of these complex characters and their tragic stories that gives everyone their own unique charm. But there's one character in particular who I adore above the rest, and most often bring up when I'm explaining to people the game's lore and why I like it so much, and that's General Radahn. He's a horrifying monster twisted by a fate given to him by his own half-sister, one that he himself inadvertently forced her to give, all somehow while being the character who halted fate altogether. And despite his grim and horrific presence, the more I learn about him, the more I come to believe that he is the most wholesome and adorable character in the story, and I mean that genuinely. Today I'm gonna go over his story as well as my personal interpretation of his actions to hopefully explain just what it is that makes me so attached to Radahn as a character.
Beyond these lands lie the scarlet, rot-blighted Caelid wilds, and upon their southern edge is Redmane Castle, in which a festival of combat is being held.
When we first see Radahn in-game is during an event called the Radahn Festival, an event that takes place early on in the game, and based on your actions and the quests you do beforehand, certain optional guests will be there to join you in the event, such as Patches or Alexander, though Patches doesn't intend on staying long. You can mingle with the guests before the event starts, learning a bit more about what's going to happen, before talking to the announcer and being introduced to the main man this entire event was made for.
Before we begin, allow me to paint you the full picture. General Radahn is cursed ever to wander. Eaten from the inside by Melania's scarlet rot, his wits are long gone. Now he gathers the corpses of former friends and foes alike, gorging on them like a dog. Howling at the sky.
The introduction is phenomenal, and ends with you returning to your player's view to hear a roar in the distance, hinting that what you just saw may have been a live image of him in the distance. When I first saw this cutscene, I interpreted it as a literal curse to wander, that he was a monster forced atop a sick horse, that's cursed to carry him from place to place, never allowed a moment's rest as its decaying body drags along something several times its own size. And while that's still a concept I find interesting, that's far from the full picture we were promised, but we'll get into that later. As you descend and get ready for the fight, possibly summoning backup, you find yourself in a large open field with a waygate at the end, a small foreshadowing to the unusually large and open battlefield that you're about to enter. And when you do enter, unlike most boss fights where you're dropped a few meters from the opponent, Radahn's has you at the opposite end of an island that takes up a large chunk of the region itself. In fact, if you come back here later and explore more of it, you'll find a dungeon that takes a decent chunk of time to get to, even on horseback. Speaking of, because of the large field, this is one of the few boss fights where you get the option of cavalry combat, and as far as I remember, the only one where you can inside a designated boss room. On entering, Radahn immediately starts shooting at you with large spears, and reading the description of them reveals that these were actually the spears that the Cleanrot Knight stabbed him with during his fight with Malenia. These spears are now infused with Radahn's powerful gravity magic, and tug the player towards them as they soar past, making them harder to dodge than a typical arrow. Due to that, a lot of players tend to hide behind the weaponry scattered around the field and inch towards him when they have openings. Another thing that makes this fight unique compared to any other in the game is that you're given summon signs throughout the field. You might be thinking, oh, but plenty of fights allow NPC summons, that's not special. But the thing here is, there's not a limit to how many you can use at once. You can spam summon signs through the whole event and bring in an army, all the people who attended the festival alongside you, and in Phase 2 you can even resummon anyone who's fallen. Because of this, Radahn is designed for AoE combat, as opposed to most other bosses who primarily target and swing in consideration of a single opponent. Now, with his phases, he technically has 3. In the beginning, he's in a ranged phase, shooting gravity spears or causing arrow rains to get a few hits before the fight, but once someone gets close to him, he enters a melee phase, running around and slashing at the group, making massive sweeps that mow down the entire army you brought in shortly after the fight even begun. And when he drops below half health, Radahn stops holding back. He starts by crashing down in a meteorite, continuing the fight with his powerful gravity magic. He creates massive fields that chase you down, pulls boulders out of the ground to hurl at you, and even turns himself into a spinning projectile to take you down. And each of these attacks are infused with gravity magic. He pulls you into each attack, making it so that you need to be a lot more precise with your dodging if you even hope to escape. When the game first released, he was even considered to be the single hardest boss in the game, later causing outrage on the controversial update where they nerfed his damage. Everything about Radahn is a spectacle and a horrific display of his might, all building up to the moment when he finally falls. Star-Scourge Radahn, Conqueror of the Stars. He was holding back the night sky itself during that fight. His people said he would never be able to fight at his full potential due to what he was holding, and it makes you wonder what kind of strength he might have shown if you could see him fighting with his full might. This fight fits his character and story perfectly, and I can't think of a single thing I would want any different. And speaking of story, I think it's time that I paint you the full picture.
Did you see that afterwards? A falling star right before our eyes. I can't fathom how Radahn was holding back something of that scale. He was a living legend if ever I saw one.
From what we know of Radahn, in his youth he had a horse who he was strongly attached to, his best friend, Leonard, the very horse he rode during the Radahn Festival. As he grew up and got much, much larger, Leonard struggled to carry him, and he feared that they would grow apart. Defying this, he went out and studied gravity magic under an alabaster lord, a species birthed from meteorites that crashed to the planet. You can find a few of these yourself throughout the game. They tend to be hostile and really strong, possessing powerful gravity magic as all celestial beings do. Under that alabaster lord, Radahn mastered the school of gravity and lifted himself so that his horse could handle the weight, and the two never separated. But that wasn't all he did. You see, the stars aren't just there for show. They're what bind people to fate, and the motion of stars guides people along life. But they're also an active threat. When a meteor crashes, it can bring a powerful and deadly alabaster lord to the world. When a shooting star falls to the surface, it can dash through cities and cause mass destruction. And if a star is malformed, well... A malformed star becomes one of a handful of creatures seen after Radahn is killed, horrific monsters referred to as Estelle, that are the pinnacle of what gravity magic is capable of. This is foreshadowed by the fact that there are a few infant Estelle along the path during one of the game's many quest lines, one that unlocks a secret ending when complete. Up to this point, the player is most likely unfamiliar with these monsters, and unaware that these are just the children, stringing you along until the very end when you meet a fully grown one, the natural born of the Void, an ancient Estelle who stole away the sky above the people of Nokron. These are celestial creatures that collide with the world and bring mass destruction on their way, and so Radahn decided to save not only his people, but everyone from this dark fate. He uses his mastery of gravity magic to hold back the stars themselves, so they could never again move freely from the sky, and so they could never again bring more destruction to the world he fights for. While this action halted the fate of the people for the better, he can't really micromanage what fate he holds. Everything was paused, and I've heard some people interpret this along with the story of him learning gravity magic to stay with Leonard, as him being a spiteful child who refuses to move on from the past and can't let go, even if it hurts others. But I don't fully feel the same. I see this more as a metaphor of wanting to save people from the pain of their inevitably dark fate, wanting to save countless lives, but the inability to do that without also stagnating those who would prosper. The many suffer for the needs of the few, but he would rather that everyone be given a respite, not continuing on to an unpredictable outcome that leaves them victim to something outside of their control, something that only he can protect them from. He has the power to save countless from the monsters and the darkness above, so why should a fraction of people's desires be worth those lives? When the Elden Ring was shattered, the demigods all fought for the right to become the god of a new era, and Radahn was no exception. His people at his side, there was seemingly nothing that could stop them. And if he was their god, he could do so much more for his people, for all the people, than he already was. But he still followed the Golden Order, something that was an obstacle for his half-brother Miquella, and so Miquella sent his twin sister Malenia to stop Radahn's conquest and prevent him from becoming the god of the New Age, sparking the War of Aeonia. During the war, both combatants were being held back. Malenia was rotting from the inside, missing an arm, both her legs, and completely blind, while Radahn was holding back the stars. This is kind of a quantity versus quality thing. I can't personally judge how heavy the stars themselves must be, so I'll just say it was an even match. In the end, Radahn almost won. and almost became the first person to beat Melania in a fight. But in the last moments of the war, Melania's strength gives out, whispering to herself before sprouting a scarlet Aeonia, a divine flower of pure rot, which washed over the entirety of the region and hit Radahn point blank. The war ends in a draw. It was at this point that Radahn started becoming the monster we see him as now, the rot eating him away, decaying his body and consuming his mind. While some people say that Melania used a cheap shot and pulled her trump card at the very end, I don't fully think that's the case either. It was said that when the Aeonia blooms its third time, she will lose all control, becoming victim of its grasp. She will no longer be herself, merely an empty vessel possessed by the rot that she fears and despises. And we know this is her second bloom, meaning that she is dangerously close to that fate that she spent her whole life trying to escape from. The fate that her brother denounced the gods for not being able to stop. And even Millicent, strongest of Melania's 5 daughters, was born from one of the 5 things that Melania lost that day. She was the most powerful, the thing that most abundantly left Melania when the second Aeonia bloomed. She was born from Melania's pride as a warrior. With how much of an impact this had on her, I really don't think Melania would willingly do this if she didn't feel she absolutely had to. In fact, I don't believe she did it of her own will at all. The first bloom was in the Halig tree, her brother's most prized creation. If the bloom really is her own willingly opened Pandora's box, then whatever happened that she would have turned it against her own brother. I wholeheartedly believe that this was not her active decision, and that in taking her down, Radahn unintentionally forced the Scarlet Aeonia itself to bloom. It's a sort of poetic irony if you take my interpretation of this event into account. Radahn wanted to save people from a dark fate, and in pursuing this haven, he sealed his own half-sister to hers, and, in turn, her fate tied into his, forever cursing him and binding him and all of his region to her horrifying fate. Radahn only wanted the best for the people who didn't have the strength of the gods, those who relied on him for protection, and those people worshipped him for the things he did for them. And even with his mind rotted, his love for his precious horse Leonard was so powerful, he would never stop lifting himself up so they could stay together. And as he devoured the corpses of his former allies, Leonard was the one thing he could never raise a finger to harm. As well as that, even as he decayed, his love for his people was so powerful that he never stopped holding the stars back to protect them. As long as he was still breathing, he would never allow the people to come to harm. And that is what I personally believe to be the full picture of the Radahn Festival. His people know everything he's done for them and everything he's still doing. How his life is saving theirs every day, but his life is rot and decay and a constant agony eating away at him that he endures all for them. They can't bear to watch as he suffers every waking moment so that they can go another night with the stars staying in the sky where they belong. The Radahn Festival is his mercy, where his people want to turn everything around. This time, they will take on the stars. And after all the trials he went through for them, they will endure whatever comes next, so he can finally rest. While that's the main aspect of his story, and already more than enough to solidify him as the best character in Elden Ring to me personally, there's still even more little details to cover. For instance, in-game you can find an item called the Long Fall Talisman, an item that when equipped will make you immune to fall damage. Not instant death, the chip damage. Basically, if a fall is low enough that you can survive, but high enough that it would still cost a chunk of the player's health to land, then wearing the talisman would completely negate this damage. In a prior description for the item, it's revealed that this talisman was based on Radahn's cat, one who had a habit of jumping from high places. As a kitten, it would jump from the high bell tower of Raya Lucaria Academy, and when it was fully grown, it would leap from the high branches of the Erd Tree itself. Along with this, reading the item descriptions of his various armor pieces tells you stories of him, including the detail that he was captivated by stories of Godfrey as a child and looked up to him, and his armor's design is actually based off of Godfrey's lion Sarash. With how many things come back to Radahn's pets or other pets that he adored, Radahn in lore is painted as just a fluffy, wholesome animal lover, and I can't think of a more perfect addition to Radahn's already pure-hearted story. It just gives a layer of wholesomeness that makes him such an adorable character. That's all I have to talk about him for now. If anyone wants to bring up another detail or talk about who your favorite character is and why, feel free to discuss in the comments. That's all for now.